Welcome to World Affairs Today, brought to you by the World Affairs Council, Washington, D.C., a leading forum for global education and international affairs.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tony Cully Foster, and I am the President and CEO of the World Affairs Council, Washington, D.C. On behalf of the Council, I welcome you to this Ambassador Series event, our fourth in a 10-part series, Women Ambassadors in the United States. Our public programs are filmed for nationwide broadcast on our one-hour weekly television show, World Affairs Today, which airs at 3 p.m. on Sunday afternoons on MHC Network's Worldview channel. Our programs are also distributed globally on YouTube TV, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and other digital platforms. Today's event focuses on Pakistan and its distinguished representative, its ambassador to the United States, Her Excellency Dr. Lodhi. A little bit about Pakistan. The population of Pakistan is approximately 194 million. In comparison to the United States, the size of Pakistan is roughly the size of Texas. Its ethnic groups are 45% Punjabi, 15% Pashtun, 14% Sindhi, 8% Saraiki, and 8% Mujars. 38% of its population live in urban areas. Education is a critical national priority as Pakistan's literacy rate is 58%. In 1947, Pakistan gained its independence from the United Kingdom. It is the world's first Islamic country to attain nuclear power. It's also home to the world's largest deep-water port, Gwandar Port in the city of Gwandar. Pakistan has been listed among the next 11 countries that, along with the BRICS, have the highest potential of becoming the world's largest economies in the 21st century. The green on the Pakistan flag represents Islam, and that Pakistan is a majority Muslim country. On the other hand, the white on the flag represents the religious minorities and minority regions that are in Pakistan. The Pakistani flag represents Pakistan's commitment to Islam and the rights of religious minorities. The star and crescent moon on the flag represent progress and light. Pakistan's role in the United Nations. Pakistan officially joined the UN on September 30th, 1947. Just over a month after its independence from the United Kingdom. It has served a total of 14 years as a non-permanent member on the UN Security Council since the country joined the UN. The most recent term served by Pakistan was in 2013. Pakistan also plays a significant role in global UN peacekeeping missions. As of August 2016, Pakistan has contributed 280 police, 85 military experts, approximately 7,000 troops to UN peacekeeping missions around the world. It is estimated that 500,000 members of the Pakistani diaspora reside in the United States. The US is Pakistan's largest bilateral trading partner. In 2015, the U.S. accounted for approximately 16% of Pakistan's exports and 1.2 billion of its imports. In May 2014, the U.S. and Pakistan established a joint action plan to expand bilateral trade and investment over a 5-year period. In addition to the important economic relationship between the United States and Pakistan, there is a critical allied defense and anti-terrorism relationship, as well as humanitarian, cultural, and education program priorities. In 2015, the United States gave Pakistan $265 million in foreign military financing in order to aid them in their fight against the Pakistani Taliban and the establishment of regional security. In October 2009, the U.S. Congress passed the Enhanced Partnership with Pakistan Act that demonstrates the U.S.'s long-term commitment to cooperation with the Pakistani people and their civilian institutions. In May 2014, following Prime Minister Sharif's visit to Washington, D.C., the U.S. and Pakistan established a joint action plan to expand bilateral trade and investment over 5 years. In January 2015, the U.S. pledged $250 million to help Pakistan facilitate the relief, reconstruction, and return of federally administered tribal areas, communities that were displaced by counterterrorism operations, as a partner in the global war on terror. Pakistan has had a long cooperative relationship with the United States on counterterrorism efforts since 2001. Pakistan has provided the U.S. with access to a number of military airports and bases, along with other logistical support for the war on terror. Pakistan has also captured more than 600 members of Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, and ISIS, and has been an increasingly important member of the global community of nations fighting our war on terrorism. Our discussant for tonight is the Honorable James P. Moran. Congressman Moran serves as a senior legislative advisor at McDermott, Will & Emery and as the vice chair of the World Affairs Council, Washington, D.C.'s Board of Directors. He is a former U.S. representative from the 8th District of Virginia. Congressman Moran served 12 terms in the U.S. House of Representatives as a senior member of the Appropriations Committee, ranking member on the Subcommittee on the Interior and Environment, while also serving on the Defense and Military Construction Subcommittees before retiring from Congress in January 2014. Throughout his more than 2 decades of service, Congressman Moran has led efforts on regional transportation, fair and open global trade, and fiscal discipline. Congressman Moran has been on the forefront of advancing U.S.-Pakistan relations. While in Congress, he was on the Congressional Pakistan Caucus and has weighed in on U.S.-Pakistan policy decisions. He has also visited Pakistan on multiple congressional trips and in his capacity as a private citizen in order to advance the U.S.-Pakistan relationship. And now to our ambassador. Ambassador Dr. Maleeha Lodhi. Her Excellency took up her position as permanent representative of Pakistan to the United States in February of 2015. She is the first female to serve as permanent representative of Pakistan to the United Nations. Prior to this position, she served as Pakistan's ambassador to the U.S. from 1993 to 1996 and 1999 to 2002, as well as High Commissioner to Great Britain from 2003 to 2008. She currently serves on the advisory board of the Middle East Center of the London School of Economics and is a member of the Global Agenda Council of the World Economic Forum. Her Excellency Dr. Lodhi was the founding editor of Pakistan's leading English daily, The News, and was the first woman in all of Asia to become the editor of a national daily newspaper. She is a recipient of the President's Award for Public Service in Pakistan. Her Excellency Dr. Lodhi is passionate about promoting and safeguarding the interests of women in conflict situations. She also believes injustice and economic deprivation are the major causes of violent extremism and calls on the UN to better address those priority issues. So please join us in welcoming to our podium of the World Affairs Council Her Excellency Dr. Lodhi and our interviewer, Congressman Jim Moran.
Madam Ambassador, it is such a pleasure to be with you today. On behalf of our President, Tony Cully Foster, and the Board of Directors of the World Affairs Council of Washington, we have been looking forward to this opportunity to sit down with you. And I have to say, even after 24 years in the United States Congress, I've had an opportunity to meet a lot of foreign affairs dignitaries, heads of state and ministers, but it is a particular delight to be with you. You are really in many ways a rock star within the diplomatic community. I hope that people watching are aware of your accomplishments. London School of Economics, you were the first woman to edit a daily newspaper in all of Asia. You were the ambassador to the United States twice. You were ambassador to England. And in every role, you have represented your country and really the goal of world peace and understanding extraordinarily well. So it's no wonder that the Pakistani government has asked you to represent Pakistan at the United Nations, and there couldn't be anyone more qualified to be the first woman from a Muslim nation to be the ambassador to the United Nations. On your wall here in your beautiful office, there are about 20 predecessors, ambassadors to the United Nations from Pakistan. I know that as soon as Pakistan became independent, and immediately joined the United Nations. But all of them have suits and ties on. They're all men. And you have a unique perspective. So perhaps you could share with us what it's like to represent such an important country, but also as a woman representing the importance of women taking their appropriate role in diplomatic and foreign policy.
Well, Jim, it's great to see you. Having spent many years in Washington myself and worked with you when you were a very distinguished congressman, I know how people like you worked so tirelessly to promote world peace. And I think that's what binds us together. We're part of the same human family. We belong to a global community. I think we are global citizens as well as citizens of our own country. We are patriotic, but at the same time, we have a sense of the other, and I think that's what binds us together. So when somebody like me comes to the United Nations, yes, I was very humbled and honored by the fact that my country, my government, chose me as the first woman Pakistani ambassador to the United Nations. And you know, when I was presenting my credentials to the Secretary General of the United Nations, Ban Ki-moon, I said to him, I said, Mr. Secretary General, it took my country 67 years to send a woman to represent Pakistan. So, you know, we sometimes take a while, but we get there in the end. And he laughed, and you know, because the United Nations is particularly emphasizing gender equality and greater opportunities for women. They're trying to ensure that within the United Nations system itself, there should be more women. And for me, coming at this time, which is, I think, a pivotal moment in world history, because we are shifting from, if you like, the old world into a newer world, which has a lot of opportunity, a lot of hope, but at the same time, a lot of challenges. It gives me the chance then to, in a way, you know, play on the global stage, because this is the global stage. This is New York, this is the United Nations, where 193 countries are represented. So, you know, immediately for me, the challenge was, okay, so I've been ambassador to a single country before. You mentioned the United States, of course, a very challenging assignment that I had previously, and then the United Kingdom. But to be ambassador to 193 countries at the United Nations is something else. So the first thing that you need, whether you're a male or a female, is a lot of energy. And I think what the United Nations really teaches you is that the dynamic here, the main dynamic at the United Nations is one of cooperation, not confrontation. Here countries learn to get along with each other, to concede to each other, to accommodate each other, and to have a sense of the global goals that we all share. And these goals range from making sure that all countries develop in an equitable way, making sure that human rights are observed everywhere, making sure that we are tolerant of each other even if we differ from each other, making sure that there is enough conversation and dialogue between civilizations, between different faiths. So really, for me, it was a voyage of discovery. I've been here about a year and a half. It was a voyage of discovery, but it was also a learning process because, as I said, you learn to understand other countries, some countries that you actually not even had diplomatic relations with. And when you're sitting in the General Assembly, the hall of the people, then the first few words of the UN Charter, which is "we the peoples," really resounds, because we the peoples means that we are part of this large but single and interconnected and interdependent global community. And we the peoples also means that we must work together to achieve the goals that we all strive to. And these goals are human progress, these goals are tolerance, these goals are also human rights, and ensuring that everybody gets a chance at a dignified life.
Thank you, Ambassador. Beautifully stated. You mentioned about the goal of economic and social progress across the globe. Pakistan, with a population of nearly 100 million people, does represent some of those challenges. About 40% of the population, for example, is not educated. That would be in the rural area, and particularly among women. And I know you feel very strongly about the need for women to become more empowered through education and to take their rightful role alongside men. Perhaps you might elaborate on that with regard to Pakistan and other similar countries.
You know, Pakistan, as you said, is a large country. We are the 6th most populous country in the world, with a population of 200 million, half of whom are women. We are the 2nd largest Muslim nation in the world. We're also a country which is very strategically located. So, you know, we're at the crossroads of the East and West. And in a way, we've tried in our journey to freedom and to independence, as well as to development, to try to be a bridge also between the East and the West. We are proud of our Eastern traditions, but we also like to learn from the West. And as far as women are concerned, we're a country that have been a trailblazer in the Muslim world. We had the first elected Prime Minister, Benazir Bhutto, of a Muslim country. We were amongst the first Muslim countries to have a female central bank governor, even before your country did. And we've also had women take part in different parts of Pakistani life, as lawyers, as teachers, as doctors, and now as F-16 pilots. So, you know, women have made strides in Pakistan, but we are also aware of the challenge. And the challenge is that access to education to both boys and girls is not available to large numbers of children in my country. So I think that is the challenge we're trying to address, because remember, Pakistan is also a country which has a very youthful population. Almost 60% of our people are under the age of 25, 26. And this is the demographic dividend that we hope to achieve in the years to come. If we educate these people in sufficient numbers, and in numbers which, you know, gives education to all, and we're able to ensure that girls also have the same access to education that boys do, then I think you will see Pakistan on the cusp of the kind of economic takeoff that we've seen in many other countries in East Asia. So that's the model that we follow. As I said, we remain faithful and loyal to our traditions and to our culture. We are proud of our heritage. We're also one of the oldest civilizations in the world, but we're a modern nation. And therefore, women's empowerment, women are represented in our parliament in large numbers. We still have our version of positive affirmative action to ensure that women have what we call reserved seats. But women also fight elections against men and win. We've had a female foreign minister. Now, I think there are very few countries in the developing world with that kind of a record of women making it to the top and women sort of shattering the glass ceiling. So, you know, we are reminded always of this famous Chinese proverb which says, women hold up half the sky. Women want in Pakistan to actually hold up half the sky. And we're holding more of the sky than we did before. And we hope we will do even better in the future.
I wonder if we might discuss for a bit what you feel we should do to stabilize the South Asian region. There has been tension, conflict, Afghanistan, India, Pakistan, and the neighboring states. What are some of the things that you think the U.S. should do in terms of providing leadership that would be beneficial in terms of peace and prosperity for the long term?
I think I would identify three key areas. The first area would be, I would urge the new administration in Washington to pursue a more balanced policy in South Asia. By that I mean, in recent years, we in Pakistan have felt that the United States has tended to, in a way, not seen Pakistan the same way that it is dealing with India. And this dehyphenation that took place is something that we feel we lost something in the relationship. So a more balanced approach towards Pakistan and India. I mean, I think the lack of balance is best represented in the nuclear deal, the civilian nuclear deal that the Bush administration pursued and in fact concluded with India, which was a discriminatory way of running nuclear policy towards our region and had consequences for our region. So that's the first piece of humble advice that I would offer. The second area I would say is the United States playing a more proactive role in diffusing tensions between Pakistan and India. And I think that can only happen if it has a more balanced policy, because the United States is in a unique position. It has good relations with Islamabad, it has good relations with Delhi. That puts us in a place where the United States can play the role of somebody who builds bridges between our two countries, because clearly, given the fraught nature of relations between India and Pakistan, somebody needs to play this role. And we think the United States is best positioned to do that. I mean, at this point in time, for example, the situation in Kashmir, the long-standing dispute between Pakistan and India is once again inflamed. The situation is grave. It poses a critical threat to regional peace and security. And again, you know, what we like to see is the United States not come in as a fire brigade to put out a fire, but to come in at a time where it can avert any kind of crisis from brewing and from exploding, actually. So I'm not suggesting that's about to happen, but I'm saying before the next crisis happens, this is a role of leadership that the United States can play. Third area I would say is on the other side of Pakistan's border. Our neighbor is Afghanistan. As you know, Afghanistan has been through a long period of conflict, war, and tragedy for the Afghan people. My country still hosts close to 3 million Afghan refugees because they've been unable to go back because there's no peace in Afghanistan. So I would like to see the new US administration backing a peace process in Afghanistan, for which my country will be willing to play a role, and of course the Afghan government will play the key role, trying to end this war that has gone on and brought so much grief to the people of Afghanistan and grief to the people of my country, because we've had to host so many refugees, and quite apart from that, it has destabilized large parts of the border. So I think in this region, there is a lot that the United States can do. And I think one of the mechanisms that has been evolved to help promote peace and a dialogue between the insurgents and the Afghan government in Afghanistan is called the Quadrilateral Coordination Group, which brings together Pakistan, Afghanistan, China, and the United States. These four countries got together, set up this mechanism, and the idea being to promote peace in Afghanistan. So I think if the new administration comes in and fully backs this mechanism, and through this mechanism is able to conclude Afghanistan's long war, I think it would make a huge contribution to regional peace and a huge contribution to world peace. We've got to find a negotiated peace in Afghanistan. I think that is the consensus of the United Nations, that's the consensus of the international community. I know the United States is dedicated also to this goal, but dedication may not be enough. It needs to be proactively involved in order to achieve and accomplish this goal.
Many have suggested that because Kashmir is such a flashpoint in the relationship between India and Pakistan, that perhaps a plebiscite of sorts that might grant more autonomy to Kashmir might be one direction that would lead to peace. You have addressed that in some speeches. Would you like to comment further?
Well, the United Nations Security Council adopted a series of resolutions when conflict first flared up between Pakistan and India almost 70 years ago. And these resolutions essentially called for a plebiscite to allow the people of Jammu and Kashmir to determine their own destiny, their own fate, their own future. And we have always advocated the need for these resolutions to be implemented. We say, and I've said this several times at the UN, that the people of Kashmir have waited for 70 years to see justice done to their cause, to see Security Council resolutions being implemented. So we do believe that the answer to the instability in our region, which is caused by primarily and principally the dispute over Kashmir, should be resolved. And I think we should remember, sometimes the international community gets somewhat confused. This is no piece of real estate that Pakistan and India are fighting over. This is about people. It's about the self-determination of a people, and their right to that self-determination is enshrined in the UN Charter, in UN declarations, and in UN Security Council resolutions. All we say is allow the people of Kashmir to decide their future.
Thank you. Very well put, Madam Ambassador. Another serious challenge that Pakistan has had to face is the violence and heartbreak that has resulted due to terrorism, if you will, whether it be the Taliban in Afghanistan or the Taliban within Pakistan. It has been a constant threat, and sometimes even in the cities. How do you feel the world's efforts could best be directed to confront this terrorism, mostly by young men?
Well, this is a very important question, and I think it's a huge challenge, not just for my country, but I think for the entire international community, because we're now witnessing the spread and the morphing of a threat, which goes by the name of terrorism or violent extremism. But what we need to do, because as a country, as you know, Pakistan has suffered huge losses. Sometimes I refer to this as the tyranny of geography. We just happen to be situated where we have confronted the headwinds of global geopolitics, as well as other dynamics of the geopolitical scenario, in which I'm afraid violent extremism in a way came to our region, and we had to confront it. We've lost tens of thousands of lives, but we've also conducted what I have always described as the largest anti-terrorism operation going on right now anywhere in the world. Pakistan has deployed over 150,000 of its troops to deal with this in our border areas, because some of this, in fact most of it, has been the fallout of the protracted conflict that has gone on in Afghanistan. So, I think when we look at the scale of the challenge, I think the lesson that we have learned, and remember, after 9/11, nobody really had a manual about how to deal with this phenomena. We all learned by doing. So did my country. And what we learned by doing was that you can deal with the symptoms, which is the more kinetic, the military, the police enforcement approach. But if you have to deal with the underlying causes, you also have to have a whole of society approach. And you also have to deal with the underlying factors that lead people towards radicalization. And therefore, the need to address disputes in our region, because that leads to violent reactions. We need to deal with international disputes that have also produced and spawned some of this. And at times it has given a rationale, much as I disagree with that rationale, of course, I reject it. But it's given a pretext, an excuse to the men of violence to use in order to recruit followers. So I think at one level, we need to deal with some of these non-kinetic factors and also ensure that there is good governance, that there is justice in a society, that people feel involved. It's an inclusive society. People are not marginalized. As you can see, some of this phenomena in some Western European countries is the product of marginalization, of alienation, which then drives people towards violent acts. Now, nobody's justifying any of this, but we're trying to understand it. So I think the approach that the United Nations has now come up with, and Pakistan has been very much part of evolving this approach, is one that goes by the name of PVE, or Preventing Violent Extremism, which addresses some of the root causes which lead to violent extremism. So, tough issue, but I think the international community has to be together on this. And what is not helpful in this is when people start pointing fingers and saying, well, you didn't do this and you needed to do this. We are in this together. This is a common thread. We should have a shared approach. And yes, at times, some countries don't do it terribly well. But the answer to that is not to demonize that country, whichever country it may be, but to say, hey, here's how we can help you, and here's how you can help yourself. So, I mean, some of the lessons that we have learned is from our prolonged exposure to this threat and the fact that we've lost so many innocent lives in this fight. But let me tell you another thing. My country is determined to fight until we've eliminated the last terrorist from Pakistan. This is not something that we take lightly. This is something that we address very seriously. But as I said, we've had to adopt a much more comprehensive approach to this phenomena rather than just rely on military means. The military means are important, necessary, but not sufficient. And I think that's the lesson that the international community has also learned.
Very good. Again, so well spoken. Now, there are many people who look at this situation, particularly in Pakistan, and pinpoint the madrasas, the educational system that is private, that has at least been partially funded by Saudi Arabia, but that focuses on religious training, some would say indoctrination, that this is a continuing problem. I know you have pointed out that Pakistan needs a broader-based public education system, but perhaps you could address this
Sure.
issue within the educational system.
Our counter-violent extremism strategy has two pillars. One pillar is the military campaign that's going on still as we speak in our tribal areas that border Afghanistan. That's a kinetic approach. But the kinetic approach is followed by the rehabilitation of these areas that are cleared then of militants and terrorists. The other pillar, and that addresses your question, is what we call the National Action Plan. This is a plan that was drawn up. It has the consensus of Parliament. It was drawn up by the government of Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, and it addresses some of the areas that you identified, which is a whole of society approach. This is not just for the government to do, but this is for society to join with the government and also address some of the educational challenges that you identified and involve citizens of our country to confront and to defeat this menace. So we are very, very conscious of the need for Pakistan to ensure that the formal educational system is one that is providing access to all citizens and not just to those who can afford it. Because remember, madrasas emerge when people don't have a choice. When they can't have access to formal education, then they tend to send their children there. And madrasas also, I think we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Some madrasas have been an issue. Others have provided people, children with basic education as well as shelter and so on. So I think we have to be very careful in not sort of branding all madrasas as something that have to be eliminated, but ensuring that the system of education in my country, as indeed in some other countries as well, is one where citizens have a choice, where citizens are not forced to send their children to a particular kind of school, but are able to send their children to schools where they come out and can compete with other children when they grow up for jobs and for better places at university, etc. So sure, I mean, this is an area we want to make sure that if there are pockets of any radicalization that is going on, those must be obviously stopped. We must reverse that. But at the same time, we must have the consensus of the clergy in Pakistan. We must have the consensus of parliament. Pakistan is a democracy. And in that sense, when you try to institute some of these changes, and you're trying to reverse the effects of what happened, let's say, 30 years ago, with the first Afghan war, when the Soviet Union occupied Afghanistan, and the consequences. I don't want to go into a history lesson here, but that led to the sprouting of madrasas. That led to a number of factors which produced the kind of radicalization that we saw. It was a consequences. I mean, I call the Afghan war of that time the war of unintended consequences. The United States was very much a partner with Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Western countries. We all worked together to roll back the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan. But the consequences of certain policies that were followed at that time led to precisely the challenge that you just talked about. So, when you're trying to reverse something which was, there for so many decades, one, it takes a while. Two, it takes the consensus because you've got to get everybody on board. They have to believe that what you're doing is the right thing and that you're not unnecessarily targeting people, because that itself produces a counter reaction. So I will leave it there.
Well, that's a very important point, and you express it diplomatically, but the United States does need to recognize that Osama bin Laden was one of the mujahideen that we trained and equipped in the course of the expelling the Russians from Afghanistan. So some of these decisions do have consequences in the long run. Part of the United Nations structure involves the Security Council. And so when we have crises that come up, often the Security Council is there really to address them. As we speak, there has been a current such crisis. There were, as we understand it, personnel in the Indian consulate in New Delhi that were acting in a secretive manner, apparently adversely to the interests of Pakistan. Do you want to say anything about that? Because I know it's been an issue that has occupied your attention.
I think the tensions between Pakistan and India are unfortunate. They're not in the interest of the people of Pakistan. They're not in the interest of the people of India. And they're certainly not in the interest of world peace. But the answer to that is dialogue. The answer to that is serious negotiations where we sit down and peacefully resolve our differences. But as I speak to you, Jim, today, India has suspended all dialogue with Pakistan. It does not talk to Pakistan at any significant level. And therefore, I think when we have tensions right now on the line of control which divides the two Kashmirs. And there's firing that goes on, civilians get killed who live close to the border. This is not a happy state of affairs. But in order for us to address this unhappy state of affairs, we have to get the two countries talking. Now, in the absence of any bilateral dialogue, one of the messages that I take to the United Nations is then the United Nations needs to step up to the plate and play a role. Because when bilateral talks are ruled out by one country, then the multilateral process needs to kick in. Either the UN Secretary General, and there's a new UN Secretary General now, a very distinguished and able leader. We hope that he will play a more proactive role than his predecessor did in helping to resolve these issues. Because if bilateralism has failed between Pakistan and India, then internationally, at least the United Nations, which has long-standing obligations on Kashmir in any case, needs to play a role. And as I said before, the United States also has a role to play because it has good relations with both Pakistan and India. So it is well positioned to play the role. It doesn't have to become a formal mediator, but it can certainly play a behind the scenes, quiet role in trying to get the two countries talking, and also talking seriously, and thirdly, actually resolving differences. Because the peace dividend in South Asia would be enormous for the people of this region. 1/5 of mankind lives in this region. Why should 1/5 of mankind be denied of the fruits of development and the fruits of peace? Now, we believe that in Pakistan, we are ready, able, and serious about talking to India to resolve our differences. And we think that Kashmir has to be on top of the agenda because Kashmir will continue to flare up. Here are people who refuse to live under Indian occupation, and they say that every 6 months, if not every day. And therefore, it's important that Pakistan and India sit down and find a peaceful settlement of this issue to allow the people, 1/5 of mankind, to enjoy the fruits of peace. Peace that other parts of the world have enjoyed. Why should over 1 billion people be deprived of this?
So well put. I'm glad I asked that question because I can see why your diplomatic articulation is just so important to represent Pakistan's position. The World Affairs Council's principal focus is on global education, in student exchanges, in bringing students from Pakistan to the United States to study here, to send students from the United States to Pakistan. As we do feel that those personal relationships in the long run are going to make a profound difference in terms of our mutual understanding of each other's perspectives. Do you want to speak for a moment about your view on these kinds of international educational exchanges, particularly with Pakistan and the United States?
I think you're absolutely right. The more durable relationship between any two countries is one that is between the people of the two countries. Governments can do so much. Again, that's necessary but not sufficient for an enduring partnership. And I think educational exchanges are extremely important. I think the United States, by running the largest Fulbright program in Pakistan, it's one of the most impressive parts of the policy that it has had under the Obama administration in dealing with improving the relationship with Pakistan. So I think more student exchanges, more such scholarships which are provided under the Fulbright umbrella, and also enabling American academics to spend some time in Pakistan, to teach at Pakistani universities, even if it's for a very brief period. I mean, there's nothing quite like an eyewitness account, an eyewitness experience of another country, because you really can't know another country unless you visited it. And I think there, the kind of educational exchanges that can take place are something that will only benefit the two countries and improve the relationship.
I know you have voiced the sentiment that you wish that the relationship between the United States and Pakistan was deeper, if you will, within the population, because there does seem to be a fair amount of anti-American sentiment. I know that even though there is a good relationship with the Saudi Arabian government, for example, there's a great deal of anti-American sentiment within Saudi Arabia. Ironically, there's not quite as good a relationship with Iran, and yet the Iranian people seem to be embracing of the United States. You have been asked this question before, and you answered it very well in previous interviews. I might ask you again, how do we deepen the relationship between the people of the United States and the people of Pakistan?
The people of Pakistan admire the United States. They admire the people of the United States. Their issue has been with certain policies that successive US administrations have followed. So I think we must keep that distinction in mind. When you say there is negative sentiment, well, at times we find a mirror image, because we find negative sentiment in the United States against my country, because I think some of the media depictions of Pakistan and its policies are responsible for creating that negative image. I think it's people like you and me that have to get out there and try to correct some of these. Some of these images are very stereotypical images. They don't reflect reality. But I think where you ask me the question that, why do people then have this sort of reservation about US policy? It's policy, not people. I think first of all the distinction has to be this. The short answer to your question would be if the United States played fair by not just Pakistan, but by the Muslim world. Because there is a sentiment that you do find in Pakistan which is shared by people in, I would say, almost all of the Muslim world. And that is predicated on this perception that the United States has had double standards and is selective in its approach, for example, on human rights. Take Kashmir. We expected the US administration to say something about the human rights violations going on as I speak in Kashmir. We have not found that. Take Palestine. Although the United States has tried hard from time to time to promote peace in the Middle East, there too Muslim people, whether in Pakistan or elsewhere, have found the United States take a less than balanced approach in its relationship with Israel and its relationship with the rest of the Muslim world. And I think President Obama's famous Cairo speech was an acknowledgement to some extent of the need for the United States to also adjust its policies. But the need then, he also talked about the need for the Muslim countries to adjust their policies. But after the Cairo speech, we didn't hear anything. So I think it will require a sustained effort on the part of the new US administration to mend its relations with a number of Muslim countries and to have a more balanced approach to South Asia, which is Muslim as well as non-Muslim, to have a balanced approach in the Middle East. And it plays fair because, people in my part of the world, in Pakistan and beyond, expect above all fairness from the United States. It sees the US as a fair society in many respects, and therefore feels that in its global policies and its global practices too, that fairness should be reflected.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Ambassador. You have answered all of our questions with great depth and breadth, and we much appreciate it. I am aware that your colleagues at the United Nations have been trying to get your attention. They want you to come over to vote, and they really can't function very well without your input. And so we don't want to monopolize your time, but it has been a great honor and privilege to be able to interview you today on behalf of the World Affairs Council of Washington, D.C. And on behalf of the board, we want to express our deepest appreciation for your time and attention and your very thoughtful responses. Thank you very much, Madam Ambassador.
Thank you, Jim. Always great to see you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for World Affairs Today, a production of the World Affairs Council, Washington, D.C. Stay connected with us at www.worldaffairstoday.org.